Throughout history, countless security exploits and vulnerabilities have affected internet users. In this video, I will go over some of the most notable ones that had a major impact on online safety. By 2005, people started using web browsers to communicate with each other. MySpace was the first social media platform to be used across the planet. By this time, web browsers rendered JavaScript, an interpreted programming language developed by Brandon Ike back at Netscape in 1995. A clever MySpace user named Sammy Karkar wanted to grow his friend list. Gee, that guy must have been suffering from low popularity. Sammy noticed he could type in valid JavaScript code and have MySpace render the results. Now, I have to tell you, Sammy is a very proud person. He even posted an HTML article on his own website explaining how he did the attack in detail. When we take a look at what Sammy did, we notice Sammy had to get past a bunch of defensive coding techniques MySpace enforced in an attempt to prevent any unwanted JavaScript rendering on their site. So Sammy had to construct weird JavaScript code and text to avoid all of this. Sadly, it was not enough to stop Sammy. I am not stretching the truth here. He himself says he did this to get girls to like him. I mean, just look at what he said or his thoughts as the worm spread earlier in the day. I mean, the things guys do for love. The attack worked like this. Sammy would publish his JavaScript code on his own profile page. Whenever a victim visited Sammy's MySpace profile page, the Sammy worm would be added to the victim's own profile page. And that means anyone who viewed the victim's profile page in turn would also add Sammy's worm to their own profile. As Sammy documents on his own site, it took less than 24 hours for MySpace users to send strongly worded messages to Sammy for spamming their MySpace profile with this. By October 4, 2005, Sammy had over 1 million friend requests in only 20 hours. The next day, MySpace updated their site to render the worm ineffective. In 2006, Sammy was arrested by the United States Secret Service and Electronic Crimes Task Force. Sammy agreed to a felony charge on January 31, 2007. He was only sentenced to 3 years of probation, 90 days of community service, and as much as $100 million restitution. You can learn more about the Sammy worm on the official YouTube video where Sammy himself discusses the exploit under Vice's channel. After news of the Sammy worm hit the public, organizations made more serious attempts to defend against cross-site scripting, now being recognized as a serious threat to online safety. The Sammy worm was not the first cross-site scripting attempt in documented history. It's just that no one took it seriously before then. But by 2015, only 47 websites were estimated to be vulnerable to an exploit by the Sammy worm, according to a study by White Hat Security. Well, Sammy, as one person put it, you definitely got guts pulling that one, as hairy of a decision that was. There is some good news to this. At least Sammy's real girlfriend called Sammy up and said he was her hero. The next story I'll share with you took place back in 1988. The first widespread internet exploit. Back in 1988, web browsers did not yet exist. People relied on a text-based application called a command line terminal to connect to other machines. Several university students used these terminals to communicate with other machines. Unix was built in C, and thus the majority of the applications people used were also written in C. As I explained in a previous video, a common problem with languages such as C is that they suffer from an issue called a buffer overflow vulnerability. A buffer overflow takes place when a machine appends data to an array beyond the array's allocated region. Back then, the internet was known as the ARPANET and was more of a science experiment that university students participated in. A computer science graduate student at Cornell, Robert Morris, wanted to record a survey of the number of people on the internet at that time. To do this, Robert Morris decided to write a computer virus. This virus, now known as the Morris worm, would exploit a buffer overflow vulnerability in the fingered Unix command. To help the virus spread, Morris took advantage of the buffer overflow in the fingered C program to hunt down more victims. Take a look at the highlighted line of code from fingered C. Do you see something wrong with it? For those of you educated in secure coding in C, you will immediately notice the get standard library function. This scans the contents of a line of text and copies its contents to the line buffer. However, the gets function will copy all the characters from a line of code regardless of size. In the fingered C program that Robert Morris used, the line buffer only had a capacity of 512 bytes. So that means if a person supplied a line from standard input longer than 512 bytes, the gets function would continue to copy the line's contents past the 512 byte in the line buffer. To protect his identity, Morris first hacked into his own computer from MIT remotely from his machine at Cornell. Once launched, Morris's worm spreader caused 6,000 machines in less than 24 hours. Back then, there were only 60,000 machines, so that's 10% of machines on the ARPANET. The worm congested computer networks, which were not as capable of handling client requests as they are today. A student from Berkeley complained machines were slowing to a crawl from the worm's influence. Other machines from universities affected by the worm included, but were not limited to, Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, Johns Hopkins, and even NASA. What is most amazing about the Morris worm is that it was only designed to work on a very specific version of Unix, Unix 4.3 BSD Tahoe. This restriction clearly did not stop the virus from harming far more machines than Morris anticipated. Emails took days to be delivered. Some institutions wiped their machine drives in an attempt to remove the virus. Others attempted to reverse engineer the Morris worm to learn how the worm worked. In grand total, the Morris worm caused millions of dollars in damage. Universities, government institutions, and even the US military panicked in desperate attempts to eradicate the virus. Robert Morris watched ARPANET crumble thanks to what he wrote. He first asked a friend to release an anonymous message explaining how to remove it out of a guilty conscience. Ironically, few people could receive the message because, again, email took days to be delivered, remember? A friend of Robert Morris contacted the New York Times about the attack. This friend accidentally revealed Robert Morris's identity by giving away the initials. So now the FBI was on his tail. In 1986, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act was already passed, preventing a person from getting unauthorized access to another's machine. Robert Morris was charged in 1989. In 1990, he was unsurprisingly found guilty of violating this act and was the first person in documented history to be convicted of it. To combat such attacks in the future, the United States Department of Defense launched the Computer Emergency Response Team, now a subdivision of Carnegie Mellon Institute. To this day, CERT offers secure coding guidelines that are respected in the tech industry. The Morris worm was not the last virus of its kind. Soon, several worms that exploited software bugs erupted. To this day, 70% of vulnerabilities reported are memory bugs. So this is not an irrelevant problem at all. By 1994, the internet evolved closer to what we see it today. People were using computers to use a web browser to visit websites. Once people around the world did this in mass number, businesses started investing in website application technology to sell merchandise online. Netscape decided to develop Secure Sockets Layer, the first version of transcript layer security, to encrypt electronic commerce on the internet, and proved to be one of the most important security innovations for the internet. The first version of Secure Sockets Layer was invented in 1994. Many serious flaws have been discovered throughout the SSL and TLS's history, since cryptographic engineering is very difficult to do properly. In fact, SSL version 1, written in 1994, was discovered to have so many major flaws, Netscape refused to publish it out of fear of scrutiny. So in March 1995, Netscape finally published Secure Sockets Layer version 2 after fixing SSL version 1's flaws. In October that same year, Microsoft was one of the earliest public adopters of the new protocol. To complete Netscape's SSL version 2, Microsoft published their private communication technology. It was meant to resolve SSL version 2's security flaws. Unfortunately for Microsoft, it never gained traction outside of Microsoft products. Microsoft's private communication technology was doomed to fail either way because by November 1995, major security flaws were discovered in SSL version 2, and embarrassed Netscape rushes to develop SSL version 3. In 1996, the Internet Engineering Task Force, the drafters and provers of requests for comments, standardizes SSL for use on the Internet. The IETF specification is almost identical to SSL version 3, but in a meeting with Netscape and Microsoft, both companies agreed to allow IETF to take over the standardization of SSL, now renamed Transcript Layer Security version 1, with the publication of Requests for Comments 2246. Sadly, it didn't take long for people to hack through the TLS system. When issuing TLS certificates, an organization known as a certificate authority is meant to first verify if the requester of a TLS certificate is the true owner of the DNS domain requesting the certificate. In January 2001, someone called VeriSign, who owns 2 of the internet's DNS root servers, allowed TLS certificates to be issued to an attacker. This hacker claimed to be from Microsoft, and so, for only $400, VeriSign issued a valid TLS certificate to this attacker. Then, if you enjoyed this video surveying a history of web application exploits, let me know in the comments what you think, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for all watching. Peace.